Strange kind of life. Hi, my name my name is Finn Murphy. I live in Boulder, Colorado, and we're here to talk about trucks. Maybe something that the people out there can remember who drive cars. Truckers, we call people who drive cars, they're four wheelers. Maybe something that the four wheelers out there might want to remember is, we're not a bunch of redneck simians. There's 2.5 million truck drivers out there in America. We're people with aspirations. We're people with emotional lives. We're people who are just like every other American, and a little respect for that would be appreciated. I got my commercial driver's license in 1980, so I can't actually do that over 40 years. During the summertime, I used to take trips with the over-the-road drivers. And I was going to college at the time studying German literature, and I decided that I'd rather be traveling America than studying German literature. So I left college after 3 years, and I've been doing it pretty much ever since. Well, I work for a movie company, so my times on the road are very, very busy from about April through the end of October. Most people, I move families, and mostly executives and things like that. I do feel socially isolated at times, all the time by myself. That doesn't particularly bother me. It's better now than it used to be in the 80s and 90s. I've got audiobooks, which I need a 12-step program to stop my audiobook habit. You should see the love letters I get from Libro FM and Audible. I do that. I listen to public radio. Podcasts. Good Lord, what did I do in the 80s and 90s? Now, podcasts, most of them are free. You can have a million different subjects. One of my favorites, I don't know if you've ever heard of Hardcore History. He'll do about 23 hours on, say, the Peloponnesian War or Genghis Khan. And I talk to people about this, and they say, how could you possibly listen to 22 hours on Genghis Khan? And I say, well, I have 22 hours to waste or to fill. So that's part of how I keep intellectually engaged. Social engagement is more difficult. And it's different now in the truck stops than it used to be, because the truck stops used to be very social places. It used to be the coffee counter. There was a separate place for professional drivers, and we could talk to each other. That was kind of nice. Now, a lot of the truck stops, the restaurants are gone. And the trucks now are so much more comfortable. A lot of people have DirecTV dish antennas, and I have a walk-in sleeper in my truck, and it's got a refrigerator and a microwave, and it's very comfortable. So for those two reasons, the social aspect of truck drivers has somewhat dissipated. Oh, well, see, the thing about moving, which is an interesting aspect of this business, I can be gone for 6 months at a time, 7, 8 months at a time. I don't have a particular route where I go from one place to another. I go where the moves go. So I might start, say, in April and start in Connecticut, say, and go to Denver, Colorado. Then the next move might take me to Seattle. The move after that might take me to Tampa. The move after that might take me to Montreal. So once I pack my clothes for the big heavy summer season, I could be home in 2 weeks. I could be home in 6 months. There's no way of knowing. I'm an expert on two things. Well, yes, I'm an expert on the Charles Manson murders. I'm an expert on the Lord of the Rings. And I'm an expert on the novels of John le Carre. I'm just a dilettante in everything else. The community used to be built around the CB radio, the Citizens Band radio, and everybody had a trucker handle. I still have a trucker handle. My handle is U-turn, because I'm always turning my truck around. Because my truck, again, being a mover, I go into places where trucks aren't supposed to go, which is to say private residences, suburban cul-de-sacs, places where people have trouble maybe operating a riding lawnmower. I've got to bring my 76-foot truck into. So that's why I'm called U-turn. The CB radio is still out there, but it's not as ubiquitous as it once was. I almost think the CB radio was like the first social media almost, where strangers could talk to strangers in a safe and sort of entertaining forum. We've morphed out of that now, but it was an interesting thing at the time. And that's another thing about sort of social isolation. I mentioned that, the drivers aren't as social as they used to when there's no restaurants, but it's much easier now with cell phones and the internet to stay in touch with friends and family. I wrote a book called The Long Haul. So I wrote the book, or I started writing the book with a handheld cassette recorder. Way back. I mean, when the handheld cassette recorder was about this big, and they just kept getting smaller and smaller, and they had the little audio tapes in them. I started doing that. At the end of the day, I would start talking into it just to sort of unwind. And then I started talking into it while I was driving, because I would see things that I wanted to remember. And then I started then I started recording things with interactions with the crews that I worked for and the people that I was moving. And that's when things really started getting interesting, because I have this sort of funny juxtaposition of the people that I move are wealthy people, and the people that I work with, because I have to hire crews around the country to load and unload the truck, these are some of the poorest people in the country. So I sort of have a front driver's seat, so to speak, between the very, very top of the economic pyramid and the very, very bottom of the economic pyramid. And when those two worlds collide, like when you're moving, it's fascinating. And that's what made me think, wow, this might make an interesting book. And my book is really just filled with stories of people I've moved and the people I work with and the experiences that I've had. Would I suggest this profession to people who want to get into it? No, for a bunch of different reasons. I'll just go into a couple of them. First thing is, being a mover, I move families. That's a specialized occupation. It takes a long time to learn how to do that, and it takes a long time to make any money doing that. So there's that. There's this whole sort of hierarchy in the trucking world, and then people do different things. So if you drive, say, liquid natural gas, we call that a suicide jockey. That's a different job. If you move families, that's a different job. If you just haul freight, that's a different job. And most of the truck drivers in America are hauling freight. We call them freight haulers. And they're just, dry box big vans that you see everywhere. And that pays about $42,000 a year for someone who's away for 6 months, at a time. It's not a well-paid middle-class profession as it was in the 1980s when I started. So that's one reason I would not recommend it. Unless you can bring in another skill, like being able to move furniture, like being diplomatic with families whose lives are being uprooted, or unless you can do something else like load automobiles or something like that. And then the second thing is autonomous vehicles, which, I haven't seen a space race like this since the 1960s. You've got Amazon, Apple, Tesla, General Motors, Daimler-Benz, everybody is in this technological race to come out with a vehicle. And when you have, 7 or 8 of the highest capitalized companies on the planet and the most aggressive companies on the planet racing each other for this, I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen very soon.